Hello, here in the third week of Advent. Happy Tuesday afternoon to you. Tuesday Tea-ology in the afternoon. Sorry if you've been waiting and your whole day, your whole week has been thrown off. It's my fault. I take full responsibility. But have a cup of tea, and that will make it all right. And we'll get back on track. Welcome to this Tuesday Tea-ology time, as we consider to talk about the doctrine of creation in terms of immaterial creation, and so speaking of spiritual realities. And in terms of immaterial creation, we have the immaterial aspect of the human being, and we have those spiritual beings who we will broadly, generally call angels. God doesn't fit in this category, even though God is spirit, but God is not created, so he doesn't fit in the doctrine of creation. Well, he's in the doctrine of creation as the creator, not as the creation, not as the creatures. But God created creatures who, like him, were spirit. Although uh, what likeness and difference there is in those dimensions is really impossible for us to tell. Certainly, we wouldn't want to say that angels are of the same kind of being as God, but they share with him that essentially non-material spiritual reality. And so we are speaking of things that are outside of our scientific investigation. And that's important to note. It's not as though we're talking about another dimension of scientific investigation. We're talking outside of the investigations of physics and geology and so on altogether. And that makes this whole domain of angelology, the study of angels, makes it a very mysterious affair. We really lean on what revelation we've been given in the scriptures, and we try not to speculate beyond that, because it really is outside of our the knowledge we can gather from other sources. As in other areas, reason may pay off a little bit, but we want to be serious about its limits. So we kind of began this discussion of angels, just establishing our categories, speaking of angels and demons who are fallen angels, and their leader is the being who is known as the devil or Satan. And that angels, the word for angel, usually we're thinking of the Greek word angelos, means messenger. And angels begin to appear in the scriptures in the Old Testament pretty early on. The first clear reference to angels differentiated from God, sometimes God's presence is referred to as the angel of the Lord. So angels who clearly, the term referring to other beings, that comes up in Genesis 19, when they are sent by God, in essence, to go and investigate the city of Sodom and see if the report is as bad as it has come across. Not because God doesn't know the reality, but no one can argue against his justice when you see that he has thoroughly, in essence, sent his servants to investigate the status. So God has various tasks for the angels, and we'll come around at the end to saying this again, but the fundamental task most of the time that they appear and human beings are made aware of them is when they are acting as messengers to communicate to human beings. And we can think about why God might communicate in that way versus other ways of communicating. But to step back for just a minute, one thing to say about the angels, who are like us, creaturely beings, but also unlike us, is that they are unlike us in that they are a group, but not a genetic family. So to take an older way of talking about this, the phrase that is used is that they are a company, not a race. We may think of them as a race in that, as far as we can tell, all of those who are referred to just as angels are of the same type or kind, but race for us, now we're not using the term in its politicized sense of races within the human race, the sociological kind of dimension there. We're talking biologically speaking. The human race is genetically connected. This is a family by descent. And so we trace this ancestry, whereas angels, as far as we can tell, have no ancestry. They have no descent. They do not reproduce. This is suggested by Jesus' comment that the angels in heaven don't marry or are given in marriage. And they seem to have been created quite possibly as a group at one time, but nonetheless sort of these individuals without a genetic relationship to each other. And that makes for some interesting differences when we try to consider this matter of fallenness and redemption and how this has worked differently with humans and with angels. So, but let me underline what I mean here, talking about a company of beings, the angelic company, rather than angelic race. I'm going to quote now. This is Tuesday Tea-ology, but sometimes we bring in the real theologians here, and this is the classic systematic theology of Augustus Hopkins Strong. So you're getting some strong theology today. He talking about saying they constitute a company as distinguished from a race. And this is what Strong said. This is back in the day, 19th century, but still good. They are not developed from one original stock, and no such common nature binds them together as binds together the race of man. They have no common character and history. Each was created separately, and each apostate angel fell by himself. Humanity fell all at once in its first father. Cut down a tree, and you cut down its branches. But angels were so many separate trees. Some lapsed into sin, but some remained holy. And he makes a reference, and then he goes on to say, this may be one reason why salvation was provided for fallen man, but not for fallen angels. Christ could join himself to humanity by taking the common nature of us all. There was no common nature of angels which he could take. So they're Strong is talking, and let's grant that there is a little bit of, it's reason through speculation, but nonetheless, it's important what he's saying, that angels have a different sort of history than we do. As far as we can tell, they were created at once. They don't reproduce. They don't. They do not suffer the physical death, which we endure, that separation of body and soul, because they are spiritual beings. But nonetheless, they are moral beings. So that differentiates them from the animals as well. So we could make an interesting chart here. Animals are amoral beings, not immoral, not wicked. If you saw my dog, you'd think animals were immoral beings, but no, their morality does not apply to them. They are instinctual, sub-sentient creatures. And then you've got humans, and they're physical and not spiritual. You've got humans, physical and spiritual, moral beings, and you've got angels, purely spiritual, moral beings. So, unlike like humans and unlike the animals, they can sin. They can fall away from God, and that is the origin of the demons. But there would seem to be, for them, it is all on an individual basis. For humanity, there was a great test at the beginning. We're going to come to that, talking about the fall. And our first parents failing that test, they sort of had the opportunity to take the human race with them, one way or the other. We might think about it in other terms of ancestry. If your ancestor emigrated to America 200 years ago, then you would be born a U.S. citizen, not from anything you had done to earn it. And it might seem awfully, unfair if someone else wanted to be a U.S. citizen, or you could put it in some other country, but a decision made generations before has an impact upon the descendants. And so if I emigrate and go and live in Ireland, my children will be born in Ireland, with all that will imply, and so we make decisions that have an impact beyond us. And our first parents fell, and that had an impact on the whole human race. With angels, it does not seem to have been the case. It seems to have been rather a matter where there was a cosmic um, uh, revolt against God, and those that chose to follow in that revolt with Satan fell at that time, and the others remained. And each side seems now to be kind of locked into their course, as it were. But every individual chose for himself. So this company of angels, they are typically um, invisible. Oh, before that, wanted to say, so while we talk about individuals, we don't know how many there are. And one of the signs that we should be cautious in this whole business, our limited information, is we really only have a couple of angels, the good angels whose names we know. Michael and Gabriel, those are the only two angels whose names were given in Revelation. So that also should inspire us to caution. We really have been told so little about them. They're invisible by nature. As spiritual beings, they're not susceptible to the sense of sight. We see that in places in the Bible. I mean, you could just take the typical claim that if you follow the Bible, it would appear that God's angels are at work and we almost never see them. So that implies invisibility. But there's a couple instances, probably more than that, but at least a couple that occur right off the bat, where identify this. There's a story in the Old Testament about a sort of prophet named Balaam, and there's an angel, and his donkey has been enabled to see the angel, but Balaam hasn't. So the angel is there, but he can't see it, and presumably no one else with him can as well. Or there's another passage, 2 Kings chapter 6. This is a very moving one. There's a city that's been surrounded by the Assyrian army, and there's a servant of the prophet Elisha who wakes up and he sees the army surrounding the city, and he says, "Alas, master, what shall we do?" This is 2 Kings chapter 6, now verse 16. Elisha, he said, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." So Elisha has been given insight to see spiritual realities which are invisible to his servant. Verse 17, then Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So there is not, God hasn't changed the reality, but God opened his eyes to see the spiritual reality which he could not discern. So who knows? We do not know the presence of spiritual powers. It is not a matter of sight that we have been given. And who knows what tales we may one day hear of incidents and battles and things going on around us that we have not been given, at least presently, to know about. When angels do appear, when they're made visible to human sight, they always seem to appear in the shape of a man. Now, there are other angelic being possibilities that we will go into, but typically speaking, what I mean to differentiate is when you think about angels in popular culture, very often, for whatever reason, it seems to be put in the feminine and to appear as a woman with wings. But the Bible does not give us this picture of the winged female angel. They always seem to appear as a man. They can be mistaken just for a man, and so their appearance can be very ordinary, it would seem. And I think the reason why they take, um, at least why they would take a human appearance when they appear, is because they're being sent to communicate with humans, and so that breaks down a barrier, just as God describes himself in physical imagery, his strong right arm and so on. The angels appear in a way that is going to be understandable to us. And while they're given various tasks, and they are given to protect God's people, that the scriptures say, the primary role they seem to be playing when they appear and people have encounters and we hear about them is as messengers, bearing from God whatever he wishes to inform his people of. And that, of course, brings us around to Christmas, notable for some angelic visits to bring this news. You might think that that the sending of an angel is done to emphasize how special the occasion is and to show us that something truly wonderful is happening, that God selects a messenger which will signify to us and make clear to us the remarkable nature of what is going on. Well, next week, Lord willing, we will talk about some of those angelic visits that led up to the coming of our Lord and Savior at Christmas. In the meantime, I hope that your Advent celebration is going great. May God bless you in every way.